She opened the bedroom door and froze. It wasn't the kind of pause people take when they reconfused. It was the kind of silence that empties the body of air, the kind that stops the world, mid-movement, in that brief instant. Every memory she had of the man she married felt like it lifted off the ground and scattered somewhere she could no longer reach. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mind tried to understand why her husband was standing exactly where he shouldn't be, doing something that made no sense, with something in his hands he should have never been holding. It wasn't the image of a secret affair. It wasn't an argument waiting to happen. It was the kind of discovery that rearranges a person's future before they even know what's happening. Because in front of her, laid out in a way that could not be explained away, was the kind of evidence investigators usually spend months searching for. Evidence tied to a violent crime police had been desperate to solve. Evidence that should have never been inside their home. And as she stood there, unable to move, unable to process the sight before her, one question echoed louder than the rush of blood in her ears. What could push a devoted wife, someone who had trusted this man with her entire life, to her absolute breaking point in the span of one horrifying discovery? Detectives would later tell reporters that this case didn't just challenge their experience. It changed it. It forced them to rethink what a household can hide, what a marriage can conceal, and how a moment that lasts only seconds can destroy everything people believe about love, loyalty, and the person sleeping beside them. This is the story that made investigators stop, step back, and admit we had never seen anything like this. The couple at the center of this story were Emily and Daniel Harper. On the surface, they seemed like the kind of family every neighbor admired. Emily, a schoolteacher with a quiet smile and a careful, organized life. Daniel, a project manager at a local construction firm, known for his charm and for always being there when someone needed a hand. They had been married for nearly 12 years, and by all appearances theirs was a stable, ordinary life. Their home sat in suburban Brookfield, a town where children rode bikes down tree-lined streets, and neighbors waved from front porches. It was the kind of place where people believed that nothing truly dark could happen behind closed doors. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the neat lawns and quiet routines, a secret was taking shape, one that would shatter the lives of everyone involved. No one, not the friends who dropped by for coffee, not the neighbors who admired Daniel's garden, could have imagined that behind the Harper home a tragedy was quietly waiting. Discovery would unravel everything, and it all began the night Emily walked into a room she would never be able to forget. This case quickly became one of the most shocking instances of a spouse walking into the unthinkable within the walls of their own home. Investigators later said that even seasoned detectives found themselves revisiting their assumptions, questioning how long a person could hide something so dangerous in plain sight. Before we dive deeper into the full sequence of events, the moments leading up to that door being opened, the evidence uncovered, and the emotional toll that followed, take a moment to do something for yourself. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories like this. And I want to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment right now and let me know, because the story you're about to hear is not just about crime. It's about trust, betrayal, and a single moment that changes everything. Emily and Daniel Harper's life, at least on the surface, appeared ordinary. They had met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared ambitions. By the time they married, friends and family described them as the perfect couple, the sort you expected to grow old together quietly. Emily's days were structured, teaching during the day, grading papers at night, volunteering at the local library on weekends. Daniel's work at the construction firm kept him busy, but neighbors often saw him jogging in the mornings, mowing the lawn, or hosting barbecues on the weekends. Yet even the most stable-looking lives can hide the tiniest cracks. Friends occasionally mentioned how Daniel could be secretive. Sometimes he'd cancel plans with vague excuses. Emily, a naturally trusting person, brushed these moments off. Neighbors noted they seemed happy, but some recalled subtle oddities, Daniel's occasional distant stares, or Emily's habit of checking her phone repeatedly as if anticipating messages she hoped she wouldn't receive. At the time, none of these moments seemed alarming, just quirks of married life. It was a life built on routine, on appearances, on the belief that trust could shield them from the unexpected. But in hindsight, those quiet routines were the perfect cover for what was about to. The first real cracks began appearing months before the incident. Daniel started coming home later citing extra work or long meetings. Occasionally, Emily would notice receipts for stores she had never visited or credit card charges that didn't match any known purchase. Small arguments over minor issues began to escalate. Daniel would vanish for hours without explanation, and Emily's growing unease became hard to ignore. She began noticing subtle changes in his behavior. Daniel's charm sometimes slipped into impatience, then irritability, and at times an almost imperceptible coldness. Friends saw Emily's growing anxiety and suggested taking breaks, perhaps therapy, but she insisted everything was fine. Daniel was just stressed, she told herself. Yet the sense that something was off gnawed at her, a quiet warning she couldn't silence. Neighbors later recounted noticing Daniel's sudden nighttime walks, his car leaving the driveway at odd hours. But in a town where everyone respected privacy, these small anomalies went unexamined. No one could have guessed that these tiny inconsistencies were pieces of a larger, terrifying puzzle. On the day Emily discovered the truth, everything seemed ordinary. She had spent the morning running errands and meeting friends. Daniel had told her he was finishing a project at the office and would return in time for dinner. Yet as the afternoon drifted into early evening, Emily found herself heading home earlier than planned, feeling inexplicably drawn back to the house. The drive was quiet, the streets calm, but inside the Harper home was anything but peaceful. As Emily approached the front door, she noticed an unusual silence. No sound of the TV, no scent of dinner cooking, just stillness. Something in her chest tightened, a warning she didn't fully understand yet. She stepped inside, hung her coat, and moved toward the bedroom. And that's when the familiar routine shattered. The room wasn't empty. Emily froze. Daniel wasn't simply in the room. He was entangled in something horrifying, something that defied explanation. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the man she knew with the scene before her. Shock paralyzed her. Panic coursed through her body, and in seconds the room became a storm of emotion. She screamed, but the sound felt weak against the enormity of the scene. The situation escalated in minutes. The calm home transformed into a crime scene without warning. Objects toppled, evidence of violence lay exposed, and Emily's realization hit with full force. Her life, her family, her understanding of everything safe in her world was gone. It was the kind of moment that leaves people unable to breathe, unable to speak, unable to think, beyond the raw, immediate need to survive the truth. Within minutes, police sirens pierced the quiet suburb. First responders arrived to a scene that defied easy explanation. Officers quickly established control, but even experienced detectives were unsettled by what they found. Daniel's initial explanations conflicted with Emily's account. Neighbors, now watching from a distance, whispered in disbelief. Officers secured evidence, separated witnesses, and began documenting every detail. It was clear that this wasn't an isolated incident or a random confrontation, but the deeper investigators looked, the more they realized that subtle warnings had existed, red flags that everyone, including Emily, had missed. What unfolded next would reveal layers of deception, secrecy, and danger that had been hidden in plain sight for months, even years. But when investigators looked deeper, they realized this wasn't the first sign of danger. And the truth, as they would soon uncover, went far beyond a single shocking night. Daniel Harper, the man Emily thought she knew, began to reveal a far more complex personality. Once investigators peeled back the layers of his life. On the surface, Daniel was polite, charming, and socially adept. He could win over neighbors with a smile and a small act of kindness. Yet behavioral experts would later describe him as someone with an obsessive need to control his environment. Records showed Daniel had a history of meticulously planning every aspect of his personal life, from finances to household schedules, often leaving little room for deviation. Friends described him as organized, almost rigid, someone who rarely left things to chance. But experts noted that this kind of hyper-control can sometimes mask deeper psychological conflicts, unaddressed, anger, resentment, or even manipulative tendencies that only surface under pressure. Investigators uncovered small but telling inconsistencies in his past. Work colleagues reported unexplained absences. Social media posts hinted at private frustrations written in tones no one had recognized as alarming at the time. Family members later admitted that Daniel could become unusually secretive, creating a private world within the family unit that no one truly accessed. Possible motives, while not immediately obvious, began to surface. Financial strain hidden. Affairs, or a desire to cover prior indiscretions, all became pieces of a puzzle that only careful analysis could start to fit together. Expert commentary suggested that, for some individuals, long-term concealment of secret behaviors can escalate into dangerous actions, especially when combined with high stress, personal grievances, or fear of exposure. Emily's emotional journey was equally compelling. Before the incident, she had lived in a state of subtle anxiety, noticing minor discrepancies in Daniel's behavior but rationalizing them as ordinary stress or coincidence. Denial had been her shield, allowing her to maintain trust and normalcy even when small doubts crept in. After the discovery, that carefully constructed world collapsed instantly. Shock gave way to disbelief, which quickly shifted into trauma. Experts would later describe her reaction as consistent with acute stress response, a combination of hyper-awareness, intense fear, and emotional fragmentation. She oscillated between confrontation, panic, and an almost paralyzed inability to act, as though her mind was trying to negotiate with an impossible reality. Psychological triggers accumulated over months played a key role. The minor anomalies she had previously ignored, the late-night absences, the secrecy, the faint hints of deception, suddenly became evidence in her mind of something catastrophic. That single instant of discovery forced a lifetime of observations and suppressed doubts into a flashpoint, pushing Emily to the edge of psychological breaking. The Harper's story also reflects broader societal pressures. In suburban Brookfield, there existed an unspoken expectation to maintain appearances. Couples were expected to uphold the ideal of a perfect marriage, to host gatherings, and to present a stable front to neighbors and colleagues. In this environment, subtle red flags often go unexamined. There is also a strong cultural stigma surrounding domestic conflict. Victims, especially, may feel shame, guilt, or fear of judgment for admitting that problems exist behind closed doors. Friends and family, wanting to believe the best, often overlook or rationalize warning signs. In Emily's case, those pressures created a perfect cover for Daniel's concealed behaviors and contributed to her isolation before the crisis erupted. The aftermath of the discovery rippled far beyond the walls of the Harper home. Family members were thrown into shock, questioning everything they thought they knew about Daniel and the life Emily had trusted. Children, friends, and extended relatives struggled to reconcile the loving husband and father they knew with the person implicated in the violent events unfolding inside his home. The Brookfield community reacted with disbelief and fear. Neighbors, once casual and friendly, became suspicious and wary. Local media coverage amplified the drama, highlighting the hidden dangers that could exist behind seemingly ordinary lives. While the press sensationalized certain aspects, it also served to spark wider conversations about trust, mental health, and the hidden pressures that can escalate into tragedy. But just when they thought they understood the case, investigators uncovered something buried deeper. Evidence that challenged everything Emily had seen and forced the police to rethink the story from the very beginning. The investigation began the moment the police entered the Harper home. Officers immediately secured the scene, meticulously photographing every surface, cataloging evidence, and collecting items that would later become critical to reconstructing the events of that day. Forensics teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA traces, and the trajectory of items scattered across the bedroom. As investigators reviewed the timeline, inconsistencies emerged. Daniel's statements about his whereabouts clashed with surveillance from nearby traffic cameras. Receipts, phone logs, and digital correspondence hinted at secret communications Emily had never been aware. Messages that premeditation. Then came the surveillance footage from a security camera in the backyard. As seen in the footage, Daniel can be seen moving with an unusual urgency, carrying items in a manner that seemed rehearsed. The footage didn't show the crime itself, but it provided critical context. It confirmed that Daniel had been in the area at precise times, contradicting his earlier statements. Each frame added pressure. Each frame painted a clearer picture of how ordinary moments masked extraordinary danger. Daniel's first interrogation was calm, almost rehearsed. He claimed confusion, denied intent, and maintained that Emily had misinterpreted the situation. But as detectives presented timelines, receipts, and the surveillance footage, cracks began appearing in his story. His voice wavered when confronted with inconsistencies that couldn't be explained away. Emily's account, by contrast, was raw, emotional, and consistent. She described her discovery, her escalating panic, and the exact sequence of events as she remembered them. Her testimony created Daniel's measured defensive statements. Detectives noted the turning point in the case came when they discovered a series of emails and texts in Daniel's deleted folders. These messages revealed planning and intentions that had previously been invisible, giving investigators the key evidence needed to shift the narrative from a domestic argument to a calculated, premeditated action. With evidence in hand, forensic experts and detectives reconstructed the sequence of events. Every movement, every action, every reaction was mapped in painstaking detail. Daniel's motives became clearer, a mix of self-preservation, frustration with marital tension, and a compulsion to maintain control. Emily's snap moment, the instant she walked in, was now understood in context. A lifetime of trust collided with overwhelming evidence of deceit. Psychologists described her reaction as a natural human response to extreme shock, an instinctive fight or flight triggered by the sudden, undeniable confrontation with danger and betrayal. Investigators could see how months of subtle red flags, hidden communications, and concealed behaviors all converged in a single explosive event. What seemed instantaneous to Emily had in fact been building over months, if not years. The case eventually reached the courtroom, where the tension was palpable. Attorneys on both sides delivered impassioned arguments, dissecting motives, character, and evidence. Daniel's defense tried to frame the incident as a misunderstanding, but the forensic evidence, corroborating witness accounts, and digital communications left little room for doubt. Emily's testimony struck a chord with the jury. Her calm recollection contrasted with the chaos of the crime, highlighting the human cost of Daniel's actions. After deliberations, the verdict was delivered, guilty on multiple charges connected to the violent act that had transformed a quiet, suburban home into a crime scene. The judge's remarks underscored the gravity of the crime, the betrayal of trust, the meticulous concealment, and the ripple effect on the family and community. For Emily, the verdict offered a measure of closure, though the emotional scars and trauma would remain indefinitely. Members expressed relief, even as they grappled with the realization of the case left Brookfield changed. Neighbors became more vigilant, wary of signs that might have previously gone unnoticed. Community discussions emerged around mental health, domestic secrecy, and the importance of paying attention to subtle behavioral cues. Local media covered the story extensively, producing documentaries and investigative pieces that brought national attention. Policy discussions also followed, with advocacy for better domestic reporting mechanisms and early intervention strategies. Yet even years later, the case continues to captivate attention, not just for its shocking events, but for the human story beneath the surface, a life built on trust, broken in seconds, leaving questions that remain partly unanswered. But even today, many believe the full truth of that night has never been told. And what Emily saw inside that room continues to haunt everyone who studies the case. As the investigation closed, the verdict was handed down, and the courtroom emptied. The questions lingered, unanswered, persistent, impossible to ignore. What truly led to that fateful? Was it a single moment of emotional collapse, or had a lifetime of hidden tensions been quietly converging, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite disaster? This is where you, the viewer, come in. What do you think really happened that night? Do you believe Emily snapped purely out of shock and fear, reacting instinctively to what she discovered? Or is there more, hidden beneath layers of secrecy, manipulation, and deception that even investigators never fully uncovered? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop your theories in the comments below. I read every single one, and every perspective matters, because the story doesn't end in the courtroom. It lives on in the questions we ask, the lessons we take, and the cautionary tales we remember. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if the tension, the suspense, and the shocking revelations gripped you as they did Emily in that fateful moment, then hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another case like this.